Finance Committee to order. I believe we have a quorum. Good afternoon. Is it afternoon yet? Yeah, good afternoon. Welcome to the May meeting of the Finance Committee of the MTA Board. I'm your host, Neil Zuckerman. And, all right, everyone's listening. Very good. All right, David, do we have any public speakers?
Yes, Chair. Good afternoon. We have 3 members of the public registered to speak today. As a reminder, we ask that all public speakers adhere to the MTA's rules of conduct and decorum. I would also ask to remind our public speakers that in the interest of time and fairness to all speakers, we limit everyone to 2 minutes. Please be aware that there will be a warning beep to remind you have 30 seconds to conclude your remarks. Our first speaker is Jack Nierenberg, who will be followed by Jason Anthony.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jack Nierenberg. I'm the president of Passengers United, the leading grassroots advocacy organization in New York for better mass transit. I do want to mention one thing, and that is how come we were not invited to be on the Blue Ribbon Committee against fare evasion when obviously we've been coming to all these meetings and it just doesn't seem right. So, let's forget that now. I want to move on to what we would like to see to make sure everyone has fair options, especially overnight. And one of those would be night owl bus routes across the city, actually connecting boroughs and expanding public transportation access, especially where subway service is either curtailed or unreliable. And one of those bus routes should be the Q60, which parallels the Queens Boulevard line on Queens Boulevard, a line that is already unreliable and should be expanded. And these night owl bus routes should be free to make sure everyone has access to public transit at night. Secondly, we want to see the M55 extended to South Brooklyn overnight, kind of filling in that overnight transit desert. We also want to see the express bus fares go down to $3.75, which will incentivize more people to take these express buses, which are often empty, getting people onto public transportation, and making the SIM1C, another essential route for Staten Island, free overnight. And finally, the city ticket, we do want to see reduced. We want it to be $5 during the peak hours and $3.75 off-peak, making it a much more affordable fare option for everyone in the city and the region. So that's all I'm going to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Our second speaker is Jason Anthony, who will be followed by Charlton D'Souza.
Hey, Neil. Hey, Kevin. Another month bringing the same issues regarding congestion pricing, and this time about fares. As you guys know, New Jersey is opposed to congestion pricing, and we should sound the alarm regarding their opposition because they are only caring about their self-interest but not the interest of the whole region. Regarding fares, we could establish a weekend of flat fare through the commuter rails like other systems have in the West Coast. That could be something between $5 and $10 all weekend. And when it comes to fare and toll increases, it should be fair throughout the region, but not affecting those that live farther north, like Neil lives, that shouldn't pay nor $500 or $600 a month to commute to the city. Instead, they should be receiving a credit for doing so. And regarding zero emissions fleet, we should have that before 2040 because other cities are getting ahead of us, and we should be doing more to incentivize commuters to using our systems. So that's all I have to say for this month. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our final speaker, who will be speaking virtually, is Charlton D'Souza.
Good afternoon, everyone. Charlton D'Souza, president of Passengers United. And very, very important, the new free fare bus routes that are being proposed need to be night owl bus routes between Manhattan and Queens, Manhattan and Brooklyn, Manhattan and the Bronx, and Manhattan and Staten Island. And what I think they should be, because of all the general orders and all the maintenance work going on in the subway, many people take 3 or 4 buses to get home overnight. And I think by having that free bus route, that would extend to another bus route, it would make it easy on everyone. And I think that actually, regarding what Richard Davies said about confusion with parallel bus routes, and that night owl bus routes would be separate from the day. So I think that would actually work, and it would be a win-win for the subway riders, a win-win for transit, because they need to get their general order work done and maintenance work, and everyone wins. Now I want to talk about the Fair Fares panel and the Fare Evasion panel, because Passengers United was not invited on that. I understand another organization that doesn't attend the committee meetings, or rarely attends the board meetings, was invited. And I don't think that's fair to all of us that come every month. We attend all the committee and board meetings. I think Passengers United should have sat there. We know the system well, and we could have given you ideas. Like, one thing that wasn't mentioned in that report that came out was all the MetroCard vending machines are broken. That's not the passenger's fault. That's not even the swiper's fault sometimes. Sometimes it's your technology that breaks down. And also, in transit deserts, there's no way to buy a MetroCard when you board that first bus. That also needs to be considered. That's why I think a third transfer should be considered as part of the bus redesigns. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chair, that concludes the public comments
All right.
portion of the agenda.
Thank you, David. Thank you. So we have a couple of thoughtful topics today. We're going to talk a bit about the budget funding and the clarity that's come out of the state for that, and then we're going to talk about fares and toll increases that we've been discussing in multiple settings and get you clarity of that. But first, a administrative announcement. Let's first get approval of the April minutes, please. Can I have a motion to approve, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Hada. Second.
Second.
Thank you. Any comments, deletions, corrections? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, motion passes. Thank you very much. The committee work plan is on page 16, if anyone has any changes. Hearing none, no vote is required. Kevin, please, give us a recap of what our friends in Albany have done for us.
Thank you, Neil. Before I do, I just wanted one personnel matter. In the audience with us is Josiane Codio, our treasurer, who is retiring at the end of the month, who has been serving MTA for decades, doing terrific work. So thank her for her hard work. She's the one that makes sure our bills get paid and our workers get paid, and we don't run short of funds every day. So thank you, Josiane.
Thank you for your service. Thank you very much.
Kevin, who's going to take her place to make sure everyone gets paid?
Well, now that we've got all the money, we got to figure that out. But yes, we have a transition plan in place. So let's talk about the state budget. It's been a great outcome after more than a year of hard work. Just to remind everybody, even turning back before December, when you looked at the budget, we had started with just about a year ago with McKinsey updating their analysis, where it became clear that ridership wasn't going to snap back after COVID, but it was going to be a slow, steady climb out, which showed $2 billion plus of annual lost revenue. And we started in July sounding the alarm that we could just wait a couple of years and wait for the problem to escalate and get worse, or we could start to take action early, ask the governor and the legislature to take action early and address the problem head on. And so good news led by the board here and then by the governor, we did get that action. So I just kind of want to walk through some of the highlights. So this chart, if you remember, in December, you approved a budget that included a package of MTA actions to significantly reduce the projected deficits, which were, roughly $2.6 to $3 billion a year over the next few years. And so we led with, MTA committing to $400 million a year of operating savings. If we had early action, we would have resources that we could not do the deficit financing and use our resources to pay down debt costs and so forth, and really shrink the deficit to the red area at the bottom. And so what you had approved in December was a budget that had a request to Albany and to City Hall for $600 million of additional funding in '23, and then recurring revenue of about $1.2 billion in '24 and '25, and additional needs in '26 and beyond. Oops, I think I pressed one. So as you know, the governor proposed in her executive budget, and then it went through the legislative process. And at the end of the day, MTA got significant new revenues that fully addressed those deficits we showed on the previous page. The biggest dedicated revenue was an increase in the payroll mobility tax for the largest businesses in New York City, the rate going from 34 basis points to 60 basis points. That is expected to generate an additional $1.1 billion a year of dedicated revenue to MTA, not subject to appropriation, not subject to sunsetting provisions, monthly flow of funds that'll add on top of our roughly $1.7 billion of payroll taxes we currently receive. The city agreed to increase its funding for paratransit services to 80%. That's expected to generate approximately $165 million a year for MTA by the city picking up additional expenses. And the state provided through its general fund a one-time appropriation of $300 million, which will address some of the early issues, and we can spread out over the next few years to balance the budget. Also, down the road, the state budget dedicated downstate casino revenues to MTA. Two components. One, 100% of the license fees for the 3 downstate casinos. The requirement is the license fee is $500 million upfront payment for each casino, and then a share of the ongoing gaming tax revenue from the gross gaming revenues generated at the casinos. Again, the split is a little bit dependent on where the casinos are sited, where if they're in New York City, MTA would get 50% of the tax revenue, and for any casinos outside the city, the MTA would get 40%, with, again, 20% going to the local municipality and counties, and then the other half, either the other 40% or 50%, is dedicated to the education fund. We expect that to start in 2026. A lot of work to go with process in terms of the siting and the competition of the casinos and the building. So we're not expecting any near-term revenue on that, but it's a great additional revenue source in the future. Also included in the budget was, part of all those funds, and I'll show you how it pieces together, is about $150 million a year to offset some additional service-related costs. The first one being, as you know, we had proposed a 5.5% fare and toll increase in 2023. There's enough funds that would allow the fare increase to be reduced to 4% for 2023, reducing revenue collection by $65 million a year. We've committed to additional subway frequency, both weekday, middays, weekends, and weeknights on select lines. We've committed for additional safety and fare enforcement investments for $35 million a year, and it was set forth in law to fund a pilot program for 5 free bus routes in New York City, 1 in each borough. So when you add it all together, the new state and city funding, the MTA operating savings that we're still working very hard and need to lock in for next year, and a reasonable fare and toll change, provide a balanced solution to fully address MTA's fiscal cliff. And this is just a summary of how the numbers work out, where the top shows that roughly $1.2 billion a year of deficit. You add in the additional costs that I talked about, gets you to the needs in the red area. And then when you take all the funding components, spread it out, you'll see provides enough funding to the bottom line show balanced budgets through 2026.
Board members' questions? Speechless.
No, I think we've been through this before.
All right, well, look, I think the magnitude, the thoughtfulness, the diversity, and the recurring nature of it, I think, does deserve repetition. The fact that we are, I wouldn't say smooth sailing, but we have a clear path to the 2020, let me just finish my point then, and which is we have a clear path towards 2026, which I think provides real relief, and I think it shows the leadership that we have from the governor and the legislature, and certainly does not obviate our need to drive out costs. We have a meaningful number to go after, which you have shown, your predecessor has shown, an ability to do that, but it's not insignificant. And we still have to, as we'll talk about next with Jay, we'll talk about how we got to get a fair increase, because while it is something we have to do, is something we don't necessarily want to do, but it has to be done because that's what organizations like ours do. So, Andrew, please.
Thanks, Neil. What the governor and the legislature have shown is what we've been saying for a long time. This is an essential service. It should be treated as one. This region is so fortunate to have a transportation system like we have, and we cannot let it fall down. We must keep it going. We must improve the service. We must make it accessible for everybody. And the legislature and the governor have taken great steps to do that. And I would say thank you once again for realizing what a treasure we have here.
Well said, Andrew. Midori, please.
If we could put the slide back up, I think that we have 3 or 4 years with zero. That means no deficit. It's been a long time since I've seen that on any chart of ours. So kudos to you, Kevin, and obviously the chair and CEO for leading this effort. I know that there are additional steps that the MTA has to take, and so I think we're going to do that, with a lot of weight of responsibility around fare increases. That being said, I think Commissioner Lopez and I made a request last month of the list of operating efficiencies and what the actual savings are associated. So I just wanted to uplift that comment again to see kind of when we might be able to see that, whether in the full board meeting or if it should be managed in the finance committee. So wanted to get some sense of that. Thank you.
That's a very fair question, and I think so. I'd like to get on the agenda for. I think if it seems fair to put it on the June agenda, a discussion maybe of the cost moves. Is that reasonable, Kevin?
Possibly. I mean, as part of the July plan, we've really been working with the operating agencies going through a very long list. They've been whittling it down to what can
Okay.
be put in place this year and next. So if not at next month, certainly as part of the July.
All right, so
July
can
plan.
we please, David, put on the July agenda, let's insert a review of the cost moves that are being proposed. So, and at whatever level they're at, whether they're preliminary, I think it's a useful, and if Commissioners Lopez and Valdivia, thank you, I took a breath there first. Valdivia have requested, I think it's appropriate for us to get it on the calendar, and let's please insert that into the agenda for a reasonable conversation. I think we have shown, this organization has shown what at the agency level or at the headquarters level to go after savings year in, year out. Your predecessor, Bob Foran, was very, very good and diligent about that over a very long period of time. So I have faith that it's going to be achieved. But we're an oversight group, and let's do that. Andrew, anyone else before we get seconds? Anyone else? Andrew.
I was just going to say that we were told in transit that some of those efficiencies require new technology and that they are looking at it. For instance, there's a machine that can detect a break in a rail long before it takes place and make a replacement before something tragic happens. So, if it's appropriate to various committees, we should be shown those in the respective committees as well, I'm thinking.
All right. Any other questions then on the funding? If not, Jay, you have the floor to give us a sense of what we're thinking about in terms of fare increases.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'll be presenting the 2020 fare and toll change that was included in the 23 budget that we adopted and passed in December. So if you can recall, in December, the board authorized staff to start the administrative process for a fare and toll change. The December 2022 adopted budget assumed 5.5% increase in the fare, which would be necessary to balance the budget. As we just heard Kevin talk about, thanks to Governor Hochul and the state legislature, the budget agreement reached last month included $65 million to avert the higher fare increase. So the fare increase will be at 4% in the 2023, and the planned toll increase will be 5.5%. So just sort of a review of our pattern of modest biannual fare increases. Since 2010, the MTA has increased fares and tolls to achieve roughly a 4% revenue yield every 2 years. These small, frequent fare and toll adjustments avert radical fare and toll fluctuations, mitigate against impacts to customers by offering predictable fare and toll increases. It helps address our expenditure growth, and it also gives us a little bit predictability in our fare and toll revenue. As a reminder, in 2021, we did not increase fares, so the last fare increase on New York City Transit and commuter rails was in 2019. Also, in addition, this allows us to go back to sort of our biannual fare and toll increase, which is very important for the long-term stability of the MTA. So before we jump into the specifics about fare and toll increases, wanted to review some market research information from our spring 2022 customer count survey. This is starting with New York City Transit. People often assume that lower income customers utilize the paper ride fare product. In this data, it highlights that 73% of our customers use a 7-day pass, and their income level is usually below $68,000, while 42% of the same income level utilize a 30-day unlimited pass. So that's the sort of the two right bars, the blue and the green, represent the second from the last is about the 73% of customers that have income less than 78%. There are most frequent users of the 7-day unlimited pass. And on the first two, the Omni and the paper ride, most of the income levels are relatively equal for Omni users and paper ride users. A little bit about New York City Transit and their market share. Pre-pandemic, 50% of the customers utilized the 7-day or the 30-day pass, and 50% of our customers used a paper ride. Since the pandemic, and the introduction of Omni, the dynamic has changed. You can see the purple is the Omni share that has grown over the last couple of years. We see that paper ride MetroCard customers and weekly customers are converting to Omni. Omni guarantees the best fare for the week since the introduction of our fare promotion on Omni in March 2022. And you can also see that the Omni market shares continually grow from the paper ride MetroCard as well as our weekly customers. A little bit on the commuter rail side, similar data from customer count surveys. It shows that unlike New York City Transit, lower income railroad customers are not able to commit to the unlimited passes solely. They purchase one-way or round-trip tickets and weekly tickets much more often than monthly passes. What caught our eye on this chart, if you look, is when we introduced the pilot program last year for the 20-trip ticket. You can see almost half of the 20-trip customers earn more than $200,000. So affluent customers are purchasing the 20-trip ticket here. Market shares on the commuter rail. Pre-pandemic, passes represented about 60% of our trips. With the reinstatement of the peak fares and the promotional fares last year, passes were nudged up to about 40% in March 2022. In addition, you can see that the 10-trip market share has shifted to the 20-trip ticket since its introduction. So the purple is the 20-trip here. You can see it's taking away from the orange on the 10-trip. And so before I move on to the fare proposals for each of the ticket types that we have, I wanted to acknowledge the board staff working group. Many of the members of that staff working group are represented here. We took a lot of time discussing over the last 6 months the proposals and market shares and ticket types. And so this is sort of the hard work of the board staff working group on the fare options that I'm about to present. So these are the New York City Transit fare proposals, which would yield a 4% increase overall on revenue. What we've done here is on the base fare, moving from $2.75 to $2.90, and that would be a 5% fare increase. This fare increase on the base fare allows us to keep the 7-day and 30-day a little bit lower by increasing the base fare up slightly to 5% versus an even 4%. This allows us to benefit the 7-day customer by increasing their fare $1 or 3% from 33 to 34. And on the 30-day pass, that would increase by $5 from $127 to $132, which represents a 4% fare increase. On the express bus pass, base fare, we'd be increasing it by 25 cents or 4% from $6.75 to $7. And the 7-day express bus pass goes from $62 to $64, a 3% increase. On the commuter railroad side, it's a little bit different. What we're proposing here, as we've done previously, is a average 4.3% increase on the monthly and weekly passes. It's really because flat 4%, there's elasticities in these ticket prices. So as you increase the fares, there's a little bit of movement in ridership, so you slightly increase the fare a little bit higher to make sure you capture the revenue 4% yield. The one-way peak average increase will be 4.6%. And we say average here because each ticket type, it will be a little different. Each zone will be a little bit different. There'll be rounding effects on the commuter railroads of a quarter and $1. So that's why we call it an average increase. Some might see a little bit higher, some will see a little bit of a lower fare increase. Neil, or Commissioner Zuckerman, you'll see that we've included a $500 cap on the monthly tickets as we've done previously, so we're still committed to that. No monthly pass will be higher than $500. On an eye towards standardization, what we wanted to do on the one-way off-peak, each railroad currently has a different discount. Metro North is a discount of 25%, and Long Island Railroad offers a 27.5% discount. So in order for us to standardize it, we're recommending a 20% discount on the one-way off-peak. As we onboard Omni, we would like to create some standardization so that it's easy for us to program things like that. And then we'll continue on the 10-trip off-peak, the discount at 15%. Some fare pilots that we have under consideration. I think we've all talked about some of these at length in the board staff working group, so I want to give a brief highlight on what we're recommending here as part of the fare and toll increase. So as part of our promotions in 2022, the off-peak city ticket at $5 was expanded from just the weekends to weekdays. We are continuing to recommend that as a pilot at $5. We're also introducing the peak city ticket at $7. This was sort of recommended in December, and we are pricing it at $7 in line with our express bus fare that I discussed earlier. It's, the service that it provides, the quality of service the city ticket and the express bus provide. So we thought that anchoring it with the $7 would be equivalent for the pricing of the city ticket peak dollar value. The Atlantic ticket on here is the decision is to keep it as a pilot or eliminate it. As a reminder, Atlantic ticket is from the Atlantic terminal. With the expansion of city ticket for both peak and off-peak, it's a good idea to maybe unwind the Atlantic ticket as we're providing the city ticket broader at all times of the day and week. For our Rockaway ticket, we're introducing that as a pilot through the city ticket. As a technology advances, we think we're going to include the fare Rockaway ticket as part of the city ticket pilot. Combo ticket will continue. We introduced that with the railroads at an $8 fee. So that will continue. And the decision on the 20-trip, as I discussed earlier, affluent customers are using the 20-trip ticket. Also, with the return of ridership and new patterns, we think that we should discuss whether to keep the pilot or eliminate it as ridership is coming back, and customers will most likely at the patterns area already have the alternative for a deeply discounted monthly ticket on the railroads. Excited to introduce on New York City Transit the expansion of the fare capping program to be more on a rolling basis than the standard static Monday through Friday that we introduced last year. This will be very similar to what the 7-day unlimited pass customer on MetroCard gets to benefit from. We think this is an exciting new development on the Omni side, and that we think that a lot more customers will benefit from the rolling versus the static cap. On the toll side, we have two scenarios that we have here presented. One is scenario A, which would be an across-the-board 7% increase on the tolls, whether by Easy Pass or tolls by mail, or an alternative, which is increasing the Easy Pass by 6% and the tolls by mail 10%. You can see from the current fares there is a difference between the Easy Pass customer and a tolls by mail customer. So we've offered these two scenarios. These were the scenarios that we put in the rulemaking notice that we did back in March, and this is sort of what we are presenting to the public as well. So timeline, today I'm presenting to the Finance Committee the update on the fare and toll. We'll issue a notice later this month or soon, since this month ends pretty shortly. We'll conduct public hearings as a hybrid, both at 2 Broadway and via Zoom in the month of June. And then we'll come back to the board in July for a vote on implementing the fare and toll increases. I said July. And then we would implement the 2023 fare and toll increase no later than Labor Day. So most likely late August would be the plan.
All right, Jay, thank you. So I think let's just do order. I think you have a couple things you want to say, and then we'll go through your questions, and I'll say a couple things.
Yeah, I just want to make one comment. Thank you, Jay. And, obviously a lot of numbers here, but I think one thing, turning back to transit, subway, and bus fares, what we really tried to do is, which this committee and the board mentioned when we talked about it in December, how do we make sure that we minimize the impact on, our lower income riders, our essential workers who have to use the system, every day and so forth. And I think that's expressed in this recommendation to really lean in and have the 7-day pass be, have the lowest possible increase, that $1, so that, because again, both the data on income and, as we know, the essential workers and so forth, we really think that's, within keeping the increase affordable for everybody. It was a way to drive the value and the equity argument through the lower cost 7-day.
Okay. Folks want to speak? Andrew.
Thanks. And thank you, Jay, for that presentation. So Atlantic Ticket was developed to get people riding in Southeast Queens, riding the Long Island Railroad, people that were in a so-called transit desert and had to take some time. We had a lady testify at one of our board meetings. It took her almost 2 hours to get to work in the financial district. She had to take a bus and 2 subways. And we thought to ourselves, if she could do it in 40 minutes, would she pay more for that? Absolutely, and she did. And so Atlantic Ticket was born. Obviously, when Atlantic Ticket was born, there was a lot more through service to Atlantic Terminal rather than the mostly shuttle service from Jamaica that we now have. So I understand the possibility of eliminating Atlantic Ticket in favor of City Ticket. We also didn't know when Amtrak was going to repair the East River Tunnel, so that was another reason we wanted to boost Atlantic Ticket. Now we do know these things, and now that City Ticket is in the 4 boroughs that have commuter rails, it makes some sense to not have Atlantic Ticket anymore. But one of the benefits of Atlantic Ticket was if you opted for a weekly for $60, you got a free transfer to the buses and subways. Thus, all your transportation needs were paid for. With congestion pricing coming, it's likely that many more folks will turn to the commuter rails rather than have to drive. And if they also had that option on City Ticket, and yes, in the peak hours, let it be a peak fare option weekly. But I think losing that free transfer and getting people to use the rest of the system would be a big mistake. You most likely would not drive if your commuter rail, bus, and subway were all paid for. And I think that's a great way to get riders on the system. And I would hope that would be weighed if you discontinue the Atlantic Ticket pilot. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Jerry.
When will we need to make a decision on the 20-trip ticket?
That would be part of the July board vote for the fare and toll increase. We'd present our comments to you that we received from the fare hearings on the 20-trip, and we'd make a recommendation whether to continue it as a pilot or eliminate it.
Okay, now as a pilot, you can discontinue that at any time in the future, right? Because it is a pilot, it's not firmly in place.
Correct.
Okay, very good. It's something that I personally fought for, and I want to see it stay. So at the appropriate, that's why I jumped out from, from the conference room, because I wanted to make that statement. All right, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Midori, anyone else? Hold on, anyone else? No? All right, Midori, you have the last word.
I just wanted to highlight that, the presentation, obviously, not just the presentation, but the content and the various scenarios that Jay, Laura, Wiles, Juliet Michelson, and I'm sure countless others put together, felt like you engaged with the board working group in a really productive way. So really appreciative of the time that you've spent on this. I think, I don't claim to speak for other members of the board, but, the fact that we were able to go with measured increases in a time when we know people are struggling, I think that was just like a heavy thing that we discussed often. But so highlighting kind of and echoing what Kevin said regarding that we try to put into context the things that are proposed today, and the fact that there are service increases associated with the state budget. I think there is some that's. I think from a rider perspective, some could see that that's justification in a way. But yes, no, just showing my appreciation for all the work. I know that's really difficult, and I know it is something that you all do not take lightly. So thank you very much. One question about public hearings. Can you lay out for us, you said 2 Broadway and hybrid. Can you just lay out the MTA's thinking around 2 Broadway and the hybrid situation versus, I think in previous years, we were in the boroughs?
Sure. I think the plan, as we finalize it, is to hold 6 hearings, which would be hybrid, at 2 Broadway and through a Zoom link for our customers to weigh in on the fare and toll proposals that we've just presented here. They would be about 3 hours long, and they would last over a 2-week period. And there, in addition to the actual public hearings, there are many other ways that customers can send us their feedback, whether that's written through emails, mailing through the information provided. There'll be I don't know the address off the top of my head, but there you can actually mail your comments physically into the email, also by email via our website. So there will be different mechanisms for us to get feedback from our customers on this proposed fare and toll increase. So that was the thinking in having it, since we have the option of hybrid, it no longer necessary to go to each borough and have everybody traveling to do that, since we can use our Zoom links to dial in. And they'll be at various times of day, so they will not be all in the evening. There will be a couple during the day and a few during the evening hours to accommodate customers.
Anything else? Well, you said earlier that you weren't sure you were speaking for other board members. Well, you can certainly speak for me. I agree. I want to thank Laura and Juliet as well. I do think it bears noting a couple of things. We haven't had a fare increase for some time. This is a reasonable increase given inflation. It is in keeping with what we did for at least a decade of having predictable 4% every 2-year increases. So it is not surprising to the public that this number is where we're at. And let us not forget, ladies and gentlemen, our ridership is 30 percentage points lower than pre-pandemic, right? So an increase we have here, which is the same percentage increase, is off a much lower base of revenue. So the impact, the benefit to this organization to maintain what it has to when we are increasing wages appropriately is that we do need to do this. This is how we have to run this reasonably. So I thank staff for doing this, and it is appropriate. So thank you for that. Okay, any other comment? Please, Blanca.
Thank you, Chair. I concur with the comments regarding all the hard work that staff did with respect to this. And I've asked this during the committee, but I figure I might as well ask it now also so that the public knows. How will this be publicized so that people know that they can comment and that they know the background information and story with regards to the increase in fares?
So we'll be publishing a public notice for hearings later this week or no later than the end of the month. We'll have that on our website. We'll make sure that we've discussed it publicly enough for that customers know that there's a fair increase coming. We'll also post many of the notices in our stations, on our buses, so that customers that are riding at our railroad stations have enough information and know that the fare increase is coming. So there's definitely different media sets that we use to inform the public.
Jane, I also think during the hearings, we were told, the briefings, we were told that on the Long Island Railroad Metro North, you're going to place them on the seats? Okay.
Yes, so there'll be seat checks, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Please, Lisa.
So for clarification on my end, usually through public hearings, you'll have a presentation from the agency before the conversations begin. Are we talking different languages, interpreters? How are we handling the reach to the minority community, the non-speaking English?
So my understanding is that we will have a presentation before each of the public hearings begin. That'll be pre-recorded most likely, and then we'll hear comments. The public notices will be printed in multiple languages. Yes, just to make sure, and on our website in multiple languages, and where feasible in our stations and the commuter rails.
That includes the pre-recordings prior to all the meetings?
I'm not sure, but we will look into it and see if we can put it online, because we don't want the presentation to be too long at the public hearing. So we may just do it in English at the hearings itself, but maybe online. We'll see if we can do a version that would be.
So I'll add another 2 cents to this. So when we were holding public hearings for the redistricting, it was simultaneous interpretation through Zoom. So as an option, you had all the various languages, but it wasn't taking additional time because it was simultaneous. And I really suggest that probably be a part of the conversation in preparation for the hearings.
I'll take that back to the team. Thank you.
Terrific.
Any other questions on transparency and community? Okay, Midori, you guys who speak twice, you you lose a little cat. No, I'm kidding. Or just go ahead, please.
Wait. Thank you, Chair. I just don't want it to be overlooked. I know Commissioner Albert has been focused on this. The slight change in the fare capping for Omni, I think that's a really big win for customers. And it goes to show from a technology perspective how important it is that we implement Omni in an equitable way too, given that there is a digital gap in New York City, but how important that is because so many people can take advantage of that. So that's definitely an innovation for the MTA, and I applaud you all. Thank you.
Anything to add? Anybody else? Elizabeth, you look like you want to say something.
No, I'm really appreciative for all the work that went in.
All right, well said. Anyone else? Okay, great. David, Budget Watch, please.
Thank you. Results are for operations through April and subsidies through May and are measured against the adopted budget. Farebox revenue is on target, just $55,000 favorable through April, and was favorable by $36 million, or 2.6%, year-to-date, reflecting favorable ridership through March and higher than projected average fare for all 4 months. Farebox revenue through April, however, remains $544 million, or 28% less than the first 4 months of 2019. Toll revenue was $9 million favorable, or 4.6% in April, and was $45 million, or 6% favorable year-to-date, reflecting higher than forecasted traffic. Operating expenses were $62 million, or 4.9% favorable in April, and year-to-date were $163 million, or 3.2% favorable. Year-to-date, 43%, or about $70 million, was attributable to favorable payroll and health and welfare costs due to vacancies, including the additional overtime to cover for those vacancies, with the remainder predominantly timing-related. Overtime was $16 million, with 23% unfavorable in April, and was $63 million, or 21% unfavorable year-to-date. Overruns were primarily due to vacancy and absentee coverage, with over 95% of the unfavorable MTA-wide variance in transit, both for the month and year-to-date. Debt service was $39 million unfavorable, or 16% in April, and was $3 million favorable, which is less than 1% year-to-date due to timing related to pre-funding of interest through mid-May and partially offset by refunding and interest prepayment savings. Subsidies were $124 million unfavorable year-to-date through May, or 6%, primarily reflecting unfavorable results for the real estate transaction taxes, that's the urban tax and MRT, which were unfavorable by $152 million, or 32%, and the for hire vehicle surcharge, which was unfavorable by $14 million, or 9%. These were offset by favorable results for the payroll mobility tax, the petroleum business tax, and MMTOA. The MMTOA favorable reflects about $7 million of additional monies that reflect the additional MMTOA that was in the state appropriation as part of the enacted budget. Taken together, operating results through April and the operating budget subsidies through May, these results are $123 million favorable against the budget, or 6%, which is steady compared to last month's results. And that concludes Budget Watch.
Questions? So David, I'll ask one. Obviously, the operating subsidies is down 6% is meaningful for us. That's we're generally not something that operates in the high single digits. So can you just give us a little more color on real estate transactions and the for hire vehicle surcharge? Because is that canary in the coal mine kind of thing that we should be paying attention to? Is it a one-time blip? Just give us some color, please.
Well, the for hire vehicle surcharge would be the easiest and first one to start with, and that's because we really haven't had a full year since that started before the pandemic. So really what you're seeing is increases compared to last year as more and more tourism is in the city, more people are taking advantage after work and traveling around on weekends and in evenings. So we think it's a temporary blip. We believe it's going to come back to where we forecasted on a monthly basis as the year goes on. For the real estate transaction taxes, it's for the MRT, it's really mortgage rates, it's refinancings. For the urban taxes, it's actually the real property transfer tax. The urban tax is commercial transactions, only in the city, only valued $500,000 or more, and the reduction actually is in the real estate transaction tax, not in the MRT. And I think part of that has to do with the fact that prior to rates going up, there was a lot more of sovereign wealth fund money coming in, funding these large transactions, and now people are borrowing, and that might be why the MRT on the urban tax side is actually favorable. But we're hoping that over time, as rates stabilize and maybe rates go down, people who have been holding off purchasing residential properties will start coming back into the market.
Kevin?
Yeah, thank you, David. Good report. Yeah, from my perspective, the real estate-related taxes are really the ones to watch because, as you know, they have a history of being very volatile, and provides over $1 billion a year in revenue to us, and so seeing it down 30%, in a few months is, it doesn't take a math genius to see it's a few $100 million of exposure to us in the operating budget. And so, it's, again, clearly driven by, a lot of the Fed policy on interest rates and some of the activity in the commercial mortgage market. So some we're going to watch closely, but clearly in my mind, it's the number one exposure in terms of volatility in tax revenue.
So David, we should expect in the July plan a revision down of real estate-related taxes?
Right now, that's our expectation, yes.
Okay. All right, well, we'll all be as a committee watching for that, so we'll see that. All right, any more Budget Watch? Olga, please, Finance Watch.
Good afternoon, Chair, and the committee members. Today, as part of Finance Watch on page 22, we're reporting the sale of approximately $700 million of new money and refunding bonds. The Finance Watch indicates that the bonds expected to be priced this month. I just want to note that the finance team is still fine-tuning the structure of this transaction, and the bonds are now expected to be priced in June or later. Of course, we will be back reporting the results of this bond sale to the committee when the bonds price. Are there any questions? If there are no questions, I would like to give a short presentation on MTA's variable rate debt. As a general guiding principle for its debt management, MTA strives to achieve the lowest possible interest cost on its debt while maintaining a prudent level of interest rate risk. To facilitate these goals and consistent with public finance best practices, MTA adopted a variable rate policy. This policy limits MTA's aggregate outstanding variable rate debt exposure to no more than 25% of total outstanding debt. We are well within this limit, with variable rate debt currently comprising only 2% of the total portfolio. On the chart, you can see outstanding variable rate bonds as the light green slice of the total debt pie. In addition, we have term rate bonds and hedged synthetic fixed rate bonds, but as you can see, those pieces of the portfolio are fairly small as well, and portfolio is predominantly in fixed rate bonds. Even though variable rate bonds is a very small part of the total outstanding debt, these bonds have several distinguishing characteristics that are important from the overall debt portfolio management standpoint and from debt service cost perspective, and that's why we are periodically reviewing and discussing these bonds with you. We have a couple of different types of variable rate debt in the portfolio, but they all bear interest rates that fluctuate in response to market movements. Unlike interest rates on fixed rate bonds, which are set at the time the bonds are issued and do not change until the final repayment of the bonds, interest rates on variable rate bonds change on daily or weekly basis with changes in prevailing market rates. Another feature that's characteristic of variable rate demand bonds, which is one of the variable rate bond types in the MTA portfolio, is that these bonds could be sold by investors back to the issuer before their scheduled maturity. This right of investors to sell the bonds back to the issuer is referred as optional tender or optional put. And to deal with optional tenders, MTA has contractual agreements with diversified portfolio of large banks and financial institutions for letters of credit. Under these agreements, the banks are required to step in and purchase the bonds back from tendering investors if that's necessary. Because of fluctuating rates and other distinguishing features of variable rate bonds, our finance team has to actively monitor the markets and the performance of our variable rate bonds in the portfolio to make sure that they perform as expected and that rates on the bonds stay within the budgeted rate. The benefit of the variable rate bonds is the expected lower interest rates. Variable rate bonds are bonds with low nominal maturities, but they carry short-term rates, and historically, on average, short-term rates are lower than long-term rates. On the left-hand side of the slide, we have a chart of tax-exempt municipal 30-year bond rates represented by the MMD index. These are long-term rates. On the right-hand side, we've charted SIFMA rates, which are tax-exempt 7-day rates, to show short-term rates. Both charts show a little over 5 years worth of data. As you can see, there was quite a bit of rate volatility during this period. However, short-term rates quite a bit more volatile than long-term rates. The range between the high and the low for SIFMA rates is over 5%, while the range for the MMD rates is under 3% for the same period. Both indices increased since the beginning of 2022 due to aggressive tightening of the monetary policy by the Federal Reserve. But there was significant additional volatility in SIFMA rates at the end of last year and the first quarter of this year due to large inflows and outflows of assets into the tax-exempt short-term rate market. Importantly, however, on average, SIFMA rates were 1.3% lower than the 30-year MMD rates, illustrating the benefit of variable rate debt over time. We talked about the benefit of short-term rates relative to long-term rates, and I also wanted to touch on how variable rate bonds perform relative to budget. In 2022, the rate on MTA variable rate bonds averaged approximately 1.7%, and that's 2.3% lower than the budgeted rate of 4%. 2.3% of budgetary rate savings on outstanding portfolio of approximately 1.1 billion of variable rate bonds translates into over 25.4 million of annual debt service savings. In the first quarter of this year, the portfolio average rate increased to nearly 3.3%, but that's still below the budgeted rate of 4%. We have this slide and the final slide on variable rate demand bonds. I'm not going to go through the detail on these two slides. I just want to say that they provide information on the expiration dates for the letters of credit from the various banks that support MTA's variable rate demand bonds and the scheduled put dates, as well as a listing of the banks that provide letters of credit and broker-dealer firms that remarket MTA's variable rate bonds. So we, as you can see from this slide, let me just note that we work with large domestic and foreign banks and financial institutions. And this concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions about the information on these slides or anything else.
Olga, you've proven two things. One is that we are fortunate to have you at the helm on this topic. And secondly, you've proven we are fortunate that we have very, very little of our debt that is exposed to variable rate rates. Please, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Chair. I also wanted to just call something out that the MTA deserves kudos for. The $700 million bond issuance that Olga was talking about for TBTA, I noted that the entire bond manager transaction has been completed by MWBE, MBEs, WBEs, and SDVOBs, and that has also trickled down to the attorneys as well. So another way that the MTA is continuing to open doors. So good news.
Well said.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Olga. Thanks for that presentation. This is an annual presentation, is that right?
Correct. That's correct.
Okay. All right, well, we'll see you next year for another. Hopefully the rates will come down by then, is all I can say. All right, let's, David, back to you on all agency items, please.
Certainly. Pursuant to the requirements of the Public Authorities Law, Section 2925, the annual investment report provides the MTA Board information on the MTA portfolio's investment performance for the period of January 1, 2022 to December 31, 2022. We are seeking board approval of the MTA 2022 annual investment report and approval of the MTA all-agency investment guidelines. The staff summaries on page 23 of the committee report, and the investment report and investment guidelines can be found in the exhibit book. I do want to point out that on page 24 of the committee book, There's a table, and the very far right-hand column, net portfolio yield for 2022 is actually 1.59%, even though it's reported 1.32. Staff are available if there are any questions.
All right, so I need a motion to approve two things. One, we're going to jointly do the approval of the annual investment report and the approval of the investment guidelines. May I have a motion, please? Thank you. Hayda, second. Thank you, Sharif. Any questions? All in favor say aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. Thank you very much. David, back to you on information items, please.
There are two information items this month, the annual pension fund report and the MTA financial statements for the 12 months ending December 2022. Both items are in the exhibit book, and if there are any questions, staff are here.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? No. Lizette is pinch hitting as Kavesh is retired, so while she has a equally nice voice, it is slightly less deep as Kavesh's. So Lizette, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Commissioner. You stole my thunder for the joke that I was going to.
Oh, sorry, I
intro,
didn't
but
even
it's
know you
fine.
should have. We should have had a prep
Fine.
session ahead of time. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
go ahead and say it. Maybe we still
I
funny.
was going to say, Matt, I'm making these items, albeit in a less owner's voice that you're probably used to, so apologies for the regular voice you're about to hear. But there are two actions for the MTA headquarters for Finance Committee approval in the combined amount of $1.452 billion. And these actions are found in the May 2023 committee book, starting on page 29. The first action is a one-year extension from June 1st, 2023 to May 31st, 2024 of a non-competitive miscellaneous service contract with Tioco Corporation to provide maintenance and support services for the network management system for New York City Transit. This is a transition time, because a new data network management system has been procured, which will replace the Tioco item by the second quarter of 2024. This extension is necessary for the transition to the new system and to provide redundancy during that transition. The Tioco system provides network monitoring for the rail control center in real time and interfaces with internal applications such as the emergency booth communication system, public address customer service, customer information screens, supervisory control and data acquisition systems, and the local and wide area networks. For this extension, because Tioco's commitment to providing New York City Transit these services, Tioco offered an overall 28.26% discount, a savings of $666,000 for a final cost of $1,690,289. So I submit this first item for Finance Committee approval.
Thank you. Can I have a motion? Thank you. Second. Thank you. Any discussion on the Tioco item? All in favor say aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. Back to you, Lizette.
All right. The second and last action is the award of an estimated quantity contracts to Sprague Operating Resources LLC and Global Montello Group Corporation for transportation and heating fuels and related services, awarded pursuant to a competitively negotiated all-agency request for proposal. The contract term will be 5 years with two 12-month options for a total duration of 7 years. This RFP consolidates all of the MTA's major fuel procurements, including diesel fuel for revenue buses. In total, the resulting contracts will provide for the delivery of approximately 72.7 million gallons of various types of fuel annually, or 509 million gallons to 179 MTA locations for a 7-year term. Bulk fuel represents approximately 94% of the total cost of the contract. The balance is comprised of the line items for fleet card services, as well as tank maintenance and monitoring. The price per gallon is composed of two parts, a base price and a differential. The base price per gallon is the cost the contractor bears to obtain the fuel in the New York Harbor region, and the price is established using a published market price per gallon, and it represents about 85 to 95% of the total cost per gallon of fuel. The second part is a competitively obtained differential price added to the base price, which covers storage, fuel additives, handling, local delivery to the MTA locations, etc. Sprague and Global's differential pricing structures are established for the full contract term, including the option years. And the award amount of $450,841,653 will be split as follows: Sprague with $1,084,951,441, and Global for $365 million and change. I submit these procurement items for the Finance Committee approval.
Okay, on the Sprague and Global's contracts, any motion, please?
After much back and forth with Lizette and Lou, with the members of the committee, I vote aye.
Okay, we need a motion.
Oh, no
I need a
motion,
mo-
I
just
move
need-
a motion, I'm so
Thank you.
tired.
All right,
Sorry.
move second. Second, someone? Second. Thank you. All right, any comments? Go ahead.
No, so let me start again, sorry, it's been a long day. Lizette was kind enough to brief some of the members of the committee before, earlier today, and we got a better understanding on how this was done. Like she said, it happens once every 7 years. The majority of us weren't around, and the last time it happened, so all our questions were answered.
Well, good, then may I call for the vote then? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Fuel hedging is now approved. Thank you very much. Okay, Lizette, we have a couple of, is that? Yes, purchase, thank you. Lizette, we've got a couple of information items, please, from the agencies.
Yes, there's one joint information item on page 35 of the committee book for Metro North Railroad, which was approved by the Metro North Railroad Committee, requesting the award of a non-competitive miscellaneous service contract for a term of 2 years plus a 1-year option to Laser Tribology BV for the lease of laser modules for both Metro North Railroad and Staten Island Rapid Transit Operating Authority. There are no more information items for Long Island Railroad this month.
Okay, thank you very much. David, as I guess you'll play the role of FinTech lead, so would you please, and by the way, can you just remind everyone what FinTech is?
First Mutual Transportation Assurance Company.
Would you
Okay.
please go ahead and cover
Sure.
the two
Oh,
issues?
wait, so.
Oh, yeah, there was one other
There was one
information
other-
item.
yeah.
Oh, sorry, Lizette.
Yeah.
Sorry. Oh, I apologize.
That's
Go
okay.
ahead.
There's one information item on page 37 of the committee book for New York City Transit, which was approved by the Transit Committee, requesting the board declare competitive bidding impractical or inappropriate pursuant to Public Authorities Law, Section 1209, Section 9B, due to the existence of a single responsible source, and approve the award of an estimated value contract to Placer American Corporation for the upgrade of critical systems on 2 New York City Transit-owned track geometry cars, TGC3 and TGC4. There are no information items for bridges and tunnels this month.
Okay, Lizette, thank you for those information items. Now back to FinTech. David?
Certainly. The first item is an action item to obtain approval of updates made to the Business Continuity Plan and the Disaster Recovery Plan for the First Mutual Transportation Insurance Company, or FIMTAC, which is the MTA's captive insurance company. This approval is required by the New York State Department of Financial Services. The staff summary is on page 39 of the committee book, and the two plans can be found in the exhibit book, and staff are available to answer any questions. I believe you need a motion to approve it.
Yeah, just a quick comment on FemTech. It's, we've got Claudia Rubin and Laudwin Pemberton from our Risk and Insurance Management Group who are available to answer questions, but do a lot of the work during the year that you see in the presentation books. So I think a couple items, first of all, if you look at the data and the audited report of FemTech, it's well capitalized, managed conservatively, has essentially just a little under 200 million of equity that we use to reinsure risks around the MTA, fill in gaps that the commercial insurance market may not, or just back to back with the commercial market. So it's the purpose of FemTech being a captive self-insurer is to, over the years we've created this capitalized entity, and it helps provide lower insurance costs to the MTA wide through a number of programs. A couple of things every year we go out and get commercial insurance for property, and it's the insurance market is what's called a hard market now. It's really hard given all the all the catastrophes to get good insurance at a good price. And so we were able to obtain about $450 million of property insurance, which is about in the range of what we procured last year. We had to go out to really a whole global network of syndicates and insurance companies. Historically, just to give you context, we used to be able to procure $1 billion of coverage. It's just not really available at, any reasonable, cost-effective levels. One thing we did do this year, I think it was mentioned at last month's meeting, we successfully did a $100 million catastrophe bond where you go out to the investor market and they, through a bond structure, they provide $100 million of property insurance, different than the standard insurance. It's really from storm surge. So if storm either at the battery or out in the sound, I think it comes in above 8 feet, it triggers a $100 million release of money to MTA. And for that, we pay investors, it's a 3-year transaction, we pay them 5.75%, which they originally wanted about 6.5 to 6.75, and we're able to negotiate it down in the final pricing. So that's kind of my overview, but obviously the team's here for a lot more detail. We also manage there's a lot of information about the investment portfolio because Femtech, runs like an insurance company, buys high-grade fixed income securities, which, throw off investment income but change in value. Also, you'll hear about the mark-to-market of the Femtech bond portfolio, which, is something you can't avoid. But anyway, that's.
Before we get to I know you have a very specific motion we need to do on the disaster recovery, but are there any questions on FemTech while we're talking about this topic? No, I do have one question. So if you just help us understand, if you take our total insurance coverage of X dollars of nominal coverage, what percentage is done through FemTech?
Across all the programs that we insure under FemTech, I will probably say about 50%.
I can't hear.
We
We can't hear you.
Oh, can you hear me?
Either speak
Can you hear
really
me now?
close to the mic or
Okay,
yell.
I will probably say with all the programs that we insure under FemTech, I will probably say about 50%,
50?
more or
Oh,
less.
very helpful. All right, thank you. Any other questions? Thank you very much. All right, so I can have a motion to approve our business continuity and disaster recovery plans. Thank you. Sharif, second. Thank you. All in favor, say, any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed, abstentions, motion passes. David, second item.
The second item is FemTech's annual meeting, which will take place on Wednesday during the MTA board meeting. The staff summary is on page 40 of the committee book with materials included in the exhibit book. I'll pass it off to Claudia Rubin, who's the Deputy Director for Risk and Insurance Management, but is also the Vice President and Secretary of FemTech, for a presentation.
Thank you, David. And good afternoon. I'm Claudia Rubin, Deputy Director of Risk and Insurance Management, and also an officer of the captive. I will be providing a brief overview of the captive, and the annual report was made available to you before today's meeting, which includes audited financial statements, actuarial reports, investment reports, and we have also provided you today with a newsletter that is in the first section of the FemTech book and provides an overview of operations. Just to give you some history, FemTech is the first captive license in New York State and is also a pure captive, which means it can only write insurance on behalf of the MTA and the agencies. The MTA board members serve as the board for FemTech, and currently Logan Pemberton and myself are officers. Today, FemTech's total assets are in excess of $1.1 billion, which supports various insurance programs across MTA agencies. FemTech is regulated by the New York State Department of Financial Services and is audited periodically. The Department of Financial Services is currently performing the audit for the period of 2016 to 2020. The captive allows MTA to maintain broader coverage with better terms and conditions and increased control over the insurance programs. In the slide, there are some highlights for the year 2022, and Lodwin will go over in further details about the investments. But just to talk about some of those, for the year ending 12/31/2022, Femtech incurred a net loss of $32 million, net investment losses of $78.4 million, offset by higher net earned premiums and lower loss and loss adjustment expenses. As a result, Femtech net position was reduced to $193 million from $225 million. This compares to an average equity position of over the prior 3 years of $243 million. Nevertheless, Femtech's key ratios, which measures financial strength and adequacy of reserves, remain well within the insurance industry recommended levels. In addition, Femtech's actuary provided a positive statement of actuarial opinion regarding Femtech's reasonableness of reserves, given its exposures, as well as Femtech's compliance with the relevant requirements and the New York State insurance laws. Now I'll go over the property program, which renewed May 1st, 2023, and is one of the largest programs in Femtech. As Kevin mentioned, the property program is procured through the global insurance marketplace and capital markets. For the 2023 property program, we were able to secure $353 million of capacity, and the CAP bond, which recently closed, an additional $100 million. This was, we reduced some of the program from $414 million in 2022, I'm sorry. And in order to keep the premium at a no more than 10%, the MTA purchased these $353 million of reinsurance. Some of the challenges faced in this renewal: we remain in a very hard property market condition, and markets are under pressure to obtain higher return for deployment of catastrophe capacity. Losses resulting from extreme weather-related events such as Hurricane Ida, most recently Ian, COVID losses, as well as windstorm, flood, and wildfires. All of these contributed to the constriction of capacity and higher pricing. These challenges are not unique to the MTA. In fact, many companies and alike agencies are seeing 25 to 40% rate increases in addition to loss of capacity. On a more positive side, we received favorable feedback from some markets on the measures the MTA has put in place to protect its assets, as well as the steps the MTA is taking in anticipating future climate risk and identify proactive mitigations to MTA assets, systems, and workforce to minimize recovery time. That concludes my presentation. Any questions?
Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much for your report. And I don't know if I missed it, but what is the expected increase that we are going to see for the OSIP program?
I will turn it over to Ludwin, who is the OSIP manager.
I believe that's July's meeting. No. Right now, we're looking at a harder market on the excess side, and but hopefully we believe we can come in around the same value we came in last time, which was around, I'm in the middle of an RFP right now, right? So I don't want to say anything, what we're expecting, but hopefully we'll stay within that same range, which was very positive. I believe we had a $90 million savings last time, so hopefully we'll reside in that same area.
Thank you. Good question. Any other questions? All right. Thank you to our insurance team at FemTech. Appreciate your help.
We also have Nora on the call, who will be talking about the CAP bond that recently closed.
That you talk about what? I'm sorry.
The CAP bond.
Very brief.
Okay, please.
Go ahead, Nora.
Thank you, and I apologize for not being able to be on video, technology problems. So Kevin basically gave an overview of our CAT bond program. This slide summarizes historic transactions since 2013, which was our inaugural CAT bond. And as Claudia mentioned, the purpose is to create more capacity for our property reinsurance. Every 100 million we place in the CAT bond market is 100 million we don't have to place in the traditional market, where the capacity is shrinking virtually every year. And also it creates some tension with the traditional market. They can't price as high the catastrophic coverage at the top of our traditional program. So couple advantages to cat bonds. We place them for 3-year term, so we're protected for 3 years. It's collateralized transaction as opposed to relying on the balance sheet of traditional insurance. And it's a parametric transaction, meaning if the transaction triggers, basically we get the money almost immediately. We don't have to wait for the claims to be adjusted to get access to this capital. So again, as Kevin mentioned, we just closed the 2023 transaction and achieved excellent pricing results. Happy to answer any questions if there are questions about the program.
Yeah, and I just want to say thank you, Nora. This is, you can see we've done 4 transactions, but these are pretty innovative transactions to lay off, risk that otherwise is, very hard to do in the traditional insurance market.
Okay, now can I say thank you to our FinTech friends? No?
We'll turn it over to Ludwin to talk about
Okay,
investments.
Sorry. Well, none of this is in my notes, so I feel like I've not been properly prepared for the extensiveness of our insurance activities. Please, sir, continue.
Yes. Good afternoon. I'm Ludwin Pemberton, Deputy Director of Risk and Insurance Management, and also Contract Manager for FinTech's Investments. Today, I'll be going over FinTech's aggregate portfolio, and for this review, I'll be speaking only to the financials of the first quarter. I got this down to 90 seconds, so the net loss, the net asset value of the portfolio is approximately $839 million, comprised of 8 investment trusts. Like other insurance captives, assets are conservatively invested in high-quality fixed income securities. In aggregate, the largest allocations are to AAA-rated U.S. Treasuries at 41% and mortgage-backed securities at 23%. Rating and duration, the overall credit quality of the aggregate portfolio is AA-rated with an average duration of 4.7 years. Performance, the portfolio returned 2.55 for the first quarter and have outperformed its associated benchmark over quarter 1 through since inception with the current investment manager, BlackRock. Steve Rossiello, MTA Chief Investment Officer, is also here. If you have any questions regarding this presentation or the larger BlackRock presentation included in tab 6 of your board book. Thank you.
I know that I'm actually looking at the printed version of it because I couldn't read that. But any questions here about our portfolio? I'll ask a minor one, which is, why don't we just have the whole thing be AAA bonds? It's mostly AAA. So is there a reason why we don't just go all the way? Is the incremental yield that much value, that it creates that much value?
Yes. Yes. That's what we get from our BlackRock, our investment manager, and that's the strategy that we have now.
Okay. Other questions? I'm so shy right now of saying we're done with FinTech, so.
There's 3 more slides.
There's 3 more slides. That was a joke.
That was a joke.
Like Lizette's joke about Kavesh. Similar. Okay. That's the end of that. Thank you very much, my friends from FinTech. We look forward to the full meeting on Wednesday. Right? There's a board meeting on Wednesday, right? Yeah, you're at the board meeting, no? Okay, moving on. Your consolidated financial and operational reports are in the committee book on page 41. David Florio, take us home with our real estate items.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Real estate has 6 action items for consideration and approval. There are 2 items for the Metropolitan Transportation Authority. The first is a lease buyout agreement with Russell Cellular for retail space at 2 Broadway. The second is the eminent domain procedures law determination findings in connection with acquisitions for 2nd Avenue Subway Phase 2. The third is for MTA New York City Transit and is a lease agreement with Khalid Hajjamed for a retail unit at 1581 Myrtle Avenue in Brooklyn, New York. The next 3 items are for MTA Metro North Railroad. The fourth is eminent domain procedure law determination findings in connection with the acquisition of property for the automotive fuel system project in North White Plains. The 5th item is an authorization to acquire property interests by negotiated settlement or eminent domain for ADA station improvements at the Williamsbridge Station in the Bronx. I note there is a typo in the staff summary. We mentioned 3 stations in the Bronx. It's a larger project involving Williamsbridge, Woodlawn, and Botanical Gardens, but this action is just for the Williamsbridge Station. And the 6th and final item is the grant of a permanent easement to the State of New York Parks Recreation and Historic New York State Parks Recreation and Historic Preservation and New York City Department of Environmental Protection for a recreational trail and bridge south of Breakneck Ridge in Fishkill, New York. Bob Paley, head of our transit-oriented development team at MTA, is here to answer questions regarding the second action item involving Second Avenue subway.
Bob, do you want to give us just a brief on the Second Avenue subway action, since you've been teed up so nicely by your colleague to your left?
Well, this is the remaining acquisitions. You recall last month we approved a very large acquisition on 125th Street. We now have in hand the 125th Street parcels, which are required as a precondition for federal funding. Those were the most risky. So these are more of the sort of the garden variety acquisitions that we'll acquire in due course, ranging from fee to temporary construction easements, all pursuant to New York State eminent domain procedure law.
Well, it's great to hear the progress we're making on Second Avenue subway, long overdue and very clearly on track. So let me take a motion, all 6 of these items at once. Have a motion to approve these real estate items? Thank you, Jamie. Second, Hada. Any conversation, questions on these items? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Opposed? Abstentions? David, information items, please.
There are in addition 4 information items. The first is an amendment to an easement agreement with Benjamin Beechwood Retail for the installation of elevators at Beach 67th Street Station in Queens. Second is a license agreement with IQMA, US LLC for retail space at the Long Island Railroad Deer Park Station. The third is our report on agreements entered into directly by the Real Estate Department pursuant to board policy. And the fourth and final item is a report on events in Grand Central Terminal Vanderbilt Hall. Happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions about any of these items, including Vanderbilt Hall's activity at Grand Central? Hearing none. Any new business for the committee? Bring back FemTech. All right, motion to adjourn then. Thank you. Second. All right, thank you very much. Thank you for your patience, and see you on Wednesday.